Welcome watchers, Justin here from JSG Watches. This channel all about watch restorations and watch repairs. For those of you that are into watches, this might be something that you can use as a reference for maybe you've got this particular movement on your own bench. And for those that might not be into watches, and if you're anything like me, I just like videos like this because it's like ASMR for your eyes. For the guys and the girls that like watching things being taken apart but put together, stick around and that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. So what we have today is we have this Russian watch. This is the first Russian watch I've come across, but it doesn't come without its problems. So I've already noticed a few, the first one being the watch doesn't run. I wound it up, I just can't seem to get that seconds hand to start moving. Also, when you pull the crown out, there's just no resistance. There's not that, it just seems a bit sloppy. There's not that snappy, clicky setting change. When you pull the crown out, push it back in. One good thing is that when I click this quick set date button, it does adjust the date. That is a common problem for this particular type of watch, but that does seem to work. We just have them other two problems that we just need to try and fix. So what we're going to do is we are going to open up this watch. We're going to take the internals outside and we're just going to strip it down, take it apart piece by piece. Every screw I'm going to undo, every component I'm just going to take apart, give it a clean, see if we can figure out one, what's going on with this watch, can we fix the problems, and two, can we get it back up and running? One thing I should have mentioned is that this is a mechanical watch. So when we open it up, you will see there are no batteries. This is run by all mechanical power. The way it gets the power is through some mainsprings, which I'm pointing at here. This being quite a unique watch because most mechanical watches, the ones that you manually wind, they have one mainspring. So the mainspring is like the fuel of the watch. It's what stores all of the energy. So when you manually wind the watch up, when you twist that crown and hear that clicking noise, what you're doing is you are just winding and putting that mainspring in tension so that it can slowly release the energy that you've stored in it to power the watch. But when we get a bit deeper into the watch, we will see them mainsprings in all their glory. But first and foremost, can I just comment on this dial? This dial it looks amazing. I really like the way some of these dials age. This one has just aged in such a nice way. That green, it's like a sunburst green now. I'm assuming that it come in a solid one-tone green. Now it looks like a sunburst green just through age. So I'm going to gently take the dial off and I'm going to put it aside just to keep it protected. And we can see here we've got the day disc, which is in Russian. So I'll take that out also, put it in my little dust tray, my little dust cover. So that dust cover, what it does is every time I take a component out, it helps organize things. So you can see this tray, when I take this apart, I'm putting it in this little green tray with the dividers, and it just helps organize some of the parts that I take out. And then it has a transparent cover on the top just to prevent any moisture or dust going onto the pieces that you take off. When we do the disassembly, obviously everything's going to get clean. So I'm just going to take everything apart, put it in without the dust cover on it. Then once I clean it, then we need to try and keep everything nice and clean. But continuing with the disassembly. Now we're removing everything to do with the calendar works. The calendar works being the name of the complication which adjusts and changes the date and the day. And what we can see here is we have this little retaining plate. So it's a little plate to retain that date disc and the day disc, but it had this tiny spring underneath. So when you are dismantling a watch, you do have to pay attention to what you're working on and what you're doing, because some of these springs are hidden. And if I was to take that out and just chuck it in the tray and that spring was to go flying, watch components are so small, chances of you finding them are very slim, because them tiny springs, they can get caught on anything. But here we can see how that mechanism works. How, when you click that button, it changes the date. So it's actually got another spacer on the outside and all these connecting arms, which acts as a spring to try and push and shift that date over. You click that button and then it's going to snap the day by 1 day. But as we saw there, they are under tension, so that part just jumped out at me. So again, just need to pay extra care and pay close attention to everything that I'm taking apart and just take mental notes of what I'm doing. so I know exactly how to put it back together. Again, organising everything I take apart. I'm putting in my little dust tray. I'm putting the screw, if a component comes out, I'm putting the respective screw next to that part as well. And then what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to take photos of that tray to know what screw goes with what part. Here we have this big chunky spacer. It's like, I don't really know why it needs that. I can see where it had the quick set day complication on there, but it seems a bit chunky. It's a bit unique, it's a bit different, but that's now off. And we can continue with dismantling this watch. One thing to note about this watch was that it's a 26 jeweled movement. The jewels just acting like bearings for the watch to reduce friction on some of the moving parts, some of the contacted parts. After doing a bit of reading, typically this is by all intents and purposes, this is just a standard 17 jeweled movement, but it has an additional 9 for the date disc. So it sounds like a high jeweled movement, but it's actually not. It's just your typical 17 jeweled movement, to be honest. And one thing you saw me do there, I've taken out the cannon pinion, but that gold looking wheel in the center, not this one, not the minute wheel, but the one underneath it, that stayed in place. I think they're supposed to be connected. Have I damaged a part yet? I don't know, but so this one I'm removing now, that's actually supposed to be connected to the cannon pinion, the one that I used a different tool to take off. I'm going to have to inspect that, do a little research, and just make sure I haven't damaged it, because that might be a problem later on. And oh no, for the seasoned watchmakers out there, can you see what I can see? This part looks very broken to me, and I'm just looking for the part that's snapped off. But this may explain why the crown felt a bit sloppy, because there should be another piece on there, but it doesn't exist. So the piece that is missing is what locks the crown when you pull it out. It's what locks that crown in position. It's what gives you that snappy feel. If it doesn't exist, there's no way that crown can get locked in position. So I think we've resolved one problem. That means I'm going to have to try and look for a replacement, because I cannot put that part back in the watch and I can't repair it. So I'm going to have to look for another one. But we have the last part coming out for this side of the watch, for the dial side, called the dial side because this is the face where the dial goes on. This being the setting lever. This one out and into the dust cover. Then we can flip it over and we can start on the other side of the watch. First and foremost, I'm going to take out, this is called the balance wheel, or the balance complete. And what it has this wheel connected to it, which is connected by a very fine hairspring. And that is very delicate, very fragile. So I'm taking that off first, just to protect it best, just to make sure I don't knock it or damage it in any way. And then I can get to taking the rest of it apart. So you see these big plates on top. These are bridges, and these just help span across the wheels, the running train underneath, all of the gears, all of the cogs underneath. They're all held in position with these plates, the plates being called bridges. So it just makes sure that they retain their position and they don't go sliding about, to ensure that all the wheels remain meshed and engaged with each other. We then got the pallet fork and the escape wheel coming out. The escape wheel looking a bit dull. I'd expect that to be a bit brighter. It is very fragile as well, so don't chuck it around like I am. You should take better care with them. But that was looking a bit flat, a bit dull. Maybe the clean will help clean it up a bit. And then we can get to these ratchet wheels. So because there are 2 mainsprings, there are 2 ratchet wheels. And then we have this intermediate wheel in the middle. So we've got 1 ratchet wheel coming off, 2 ratchet wheels coming off, a click spring, which means that then ratchet wheels can only rotate in one direction. So as you can imagine, when you try and put the power into the mainspring, as I mentioned, it's like the fuel tank. It holds all the energy for the watch. But when you put the power in, you don't want the power coming back out. You want the power to store and get released slowly. So that click spring just prevents the ratchet wheel or the mainspring from reversing back and releasing all the power in one go. But I feel like there's a ring on there, but it just doesn't seem to be coming off. So I'm just going to move on. I couldn't get it off, so it's no harm keeping it in place. Maybe there is not one there, but I would just expect a ring to be on that little post, but I couldn't seem to get anything off of it. Then we can get this bigger bridge off, the barrel bridge, held in place with 3 screws. So I'm just going to take them out and I'm just going to gently lever this plate up, just so that I can get some gap in there to then lift it up freely with my tweezers. Again, sometimes there's little springs underneath these plates, so before I chuck it down, I just had to look underneath to see if there's any springs underneath, but there wasn't on this one. And then I can take the barrels out, the barrels which hold the main springs, and then the center wheel coming out, and then this last bridge, this last little plate, which retains the last of the trainer wheels. But it seems a bit sticky, a bit gummy, which is an indication that this watch probably not been serviced in a long time. So in a mechanical watch, you can imagine, in order to keep these things serviced, just like a car, you have to put oils on them. And them oils over time, just like in your car, it goes bad, it gets old. So same thing with a watch. To prolong the life of a watch, you have to change them oils. Otherwise, they just get a bit sticky, get a bit tacky. And instead of lubricating and reducing friction, they can actually increase friction and increase the wear. So I'm just getting everything ready for cleaning. Putting this balance wheel back on, just to, again, protect it before I put it into the ultrasonic cleaner. Because I don't want that thing rattling around. The hairspring that's connected to that balance wheel, it could get easily tangled. And if it gets tangled, it's damaged. That balance wheel is like the engine of the watch. It's what helps the watch run. So if your engine cuts out or your balance wheel is damaged or faulty, the watch it can't run at all. So we saw there all of the watch components, they got washed, they got put through an ultrasonic cleaner, through a 3-stage rinse. And now the plan is to put everything back together, but in the reverse order. Starting with the train of wheels, and this one being the escape wheel. So you remember I said that I thought the escape wheel looked a bit flat? It's that one with the 4 spokes and the funny looking teeth on the outside of it. That's supposed to be a nice bright and shiny colour, but this one's looking a bit rusty, looking a bit corroded. I don't know if that's going to affect the watch. But we will see. When we get this thing back together, we'll put it on a time grapher just to see how well this watch is running. But putting these wheels back, we can see they're nicely laid out, to be honest. It gives you quite a nice visual of exactly how all of these wheels engage. And then we have this bridge on top just to retain 3 of them down. So these bridges, they have the jewels. So when you hear a watch has got jewels, the jewels aren't actually anything fancy. The jewels are just synthetic rubies or synthetic sapphires. So they're not expensive. But the more jewels in a watch, typically the better a watch will run. Because anything that rotates, what you don't want is the pivots of them wheels, of the cogs. You don't want them being metal on metal. So they put these jewels in to try and reduce the friction on them contact points. And what we'll do later is we'll oil them jewels just to try and keep everything nicely lubricated. And we'll give everything a check. So before I put that plate down, you just need to make sure that all of them wheels are in their respective jewels and they are all located and sat properly before you tie that down, because them pivots are very, very fine. They're sub 1mm, very small. It takes one misalignment of one of them wheels, you screw it down, damaged, gone. You'd need a new one. Or you'd need to repair it. I currently have no idea how I would repair it. You would need a watchmaker's lathe, which is well beyond my skill set right now. Maybe in the future, but absolutely not right now. So every time I'm putting some of these plates on, before I fully clamp down the screws, I just double check, triple check that them wheels are meshed, engaged and spinning freely, just to make sure that I'm not damaging anything. So you can see here I'm just making sure that it's a bit stuck at the minute. See what I mean? So if it's a bit, there we go. So if it's a bit stuck, it means something's not sat right. It's only when everything spins freely with minimal resistance that everything is sat where it should be. So in order to make sure that nothing jumps out, I've got this little bit of wood and I'm just holding down that bridge just to make sure that it doesn't jump up. So when I screw the screws down, everything's okay. Now we can get onto these barrels with the main springs. One thing that I saw on these ones is they have like a special spring in them. It's called like a T-end spring, which the end of that spring needs to sit in a hole in the barrel. So the barrel is the cup that the spring sits in. That T bar locks that spring into position, and if that T isn't in its position, then that main spring will just rotate and it won't lock and it will just slip and it won't be able to hold as much power. So I did look at how to remove them, how to put them back in. My main spring winder wasn't enough I didn't have a small enough one to use it to put these ones back in. So what I did is I just took the caps off. I put them in a dip in some alcoholic solution just to clean them up, dried them off, and then reinstalled some new grease on their mainsprings. I couldn't take them springs out because I just feared I couldn't get them back in. Anyone else that's worked on T-springs, please let me know how you do it, because I couldn't find any information and I couldn't find anyone that had a good experience on getting them back in, especially when the main barrels are quite small diameter, like these ones. But for now, I couldn't find anything that would hinder the watch from running. So I think that these barrels, these mainsprings, they're okay. They should work. They should operate as we'd expect. So we've got the barrel bridge going on now. This one looking nice and shiny after it's clean. The cleaning I use, again, I've mentioned it before, but my cleaning is very crude. I only use an ultrasonic cleaner. I don't have a professional watchmaker's cleaner machine. And I just do it in 3 stages. An initial degrease, and I just use lighter fluid to try and degrease all the components. Then I put everything into a first rinse, being an alcohol solution. Then a third rinse, another alcohol solution. And I just put each cycle into the ultrasonic cleaner for around 10 minutes. And for now, it seems to do the job. It seems to bring out everything into quite a nice bright finish, as we can see here. So I'm actually quite happy with the result. One thing to note though, for anyone that may want to copy my method, anything that has shellac, so we're talking the pallet fork and the balance wheel, anything that has shellac cannot go into an alcohol solution. Before you put it through that stage of the clean, it's best to just remove it, just to make sure that the alcohol doesn't dissolve the shellac. Because what the alcohol will do is alcohol dissolve the shellac, and so the jewels that are held in position, like your pallet stones or the impulse jewel for the balance wheel, they would just fall apart. They would just fall out. And resetting them with some new shellac is another job. So just something to know if you are looking to get into this hobby yourselves. But so far, installation going well. We got the barrel bridge back in place now. We got the ratchet wheels back in place, the click spring back on, and I'm just oiling some of these posts with a fine oil, just to reduce the friction on these parts. And you'll see that I'm using these 2 wooden cocktail stick looking things just to try and seat anything, or if I want to try and rotate them ratchet wheels, instead of using metal on metal, if I'm using steel tweezers on some of these metal components, I'm just going to scratch and mark it up. And when you're working on watches, you don't really want to scratch and mark anything up. You want everything to remain with that nice brushed finish that we can see. So if I'm trying to position something or hold something down with a bit of pressure, what I'll typically use is just one of them wooden sticks. Just because wood is softer than metal, so as much pressure as I put down, that wood is not going to mark or scuff anything that I'm holding in position. We got the pallet fork going in, held down with this pallet bridge. And I'm just going to gently try and align it so that I've got this pallet fork in its respective jewel, as well as the pivot on the top of the pallet fork goes through that bridge. I'm going to use that wooden stick to hold it in position. Lightly clamp it down. Give the watch a little wind. So what I'm doing is I'm actually rotating one of them ratchet wheels to put some power into the mainspring. And I just want to make sure that I can flip this pallet fork, which we can see here, and that power is being delivered to that pallet fork. So what you would see is when I flip it, it's a nice snappy flip from left to right, left to right. If that was looking flat or it wasn't flipping, there's a problem. This one flips over exactly as we would expect it to do. So now we can move on to putting this ring on, this big clunky ring. It's not the nicest looking thing in the world, but it serves a purpose. It's what houses that quick set date set in arms. And then we can get a bit of grease, this specific grease, onto the exit stone of the pallet fork. I'm just going to nudge it over a few times just to try and disperse that oil a bit along that escape wheel. But installation going well. This watch quite a nice one to work on actually. Now we can get to everyone's favourite part, to putting this balance wheel back in place. We'll remember that this watch didn't run when we got it on the bench originally. I'm hoping when we put this in place, fingers crossed this thing fires up. I've not seen this thing run. Oh yeah. We see some movement, but then it stopped. Why did it stop? I'm just putting a little pressure down, and it doesn't seem to want to kick up. Maybe it's just not sat properly. Let's just see if we can manipulate it back in position. It wants to go, but it's just not going all the way. It just seems to be hanging up a bit. We've got a bit more motion here. Maybe if we get the screw in, maybe the balance cock is just not level. So let's put the screw in. Let's clamp it down and let's stop the wheel completely. There we go. You see that now? That's the sort of motion that we want to see. I'm just going to put a bit more power into the mainspring, and let's have a look. Oh yes, there we go, guys. That's looking nice and healthy there. That's running as we would expect it to run. So watch back up and running. Before we put it on a time grapher though, as mentioned earlier, we need to oil some of these jewels. So what I'm just going to use my microscope. My microscope not the best. Mine's a digital one. I'd rather have I think I might have to invest into a stereo one. A microscope with the optical lenses, because this one quite difficult to work with actually. But I'm just going to run around. I'm just going to oil the jewels. The only one that I haven't oiled is for the pallet fork. Then we can get to the cap jewels on the balance wheel. So these have these brass retaining clips, which I'm just going to... No, what have I done? That's just gone flying across the table. I'm going to have to try and look for that and hope I find it. And to let you guys in on a little secret, I didn't find it. That went missing. Lucky I had the donor movement, which has a spare. But that was under a lot of tension, and that just went flying. I looked for a good 20 minutes and I just couldn't find it. So thankfully, I had a spare to put in. The spare going in now, and what you'll see is, again, I tried for a good 20-25 minutes to try and get this in position, but I just couldn't do it. I just could not do it. So what I had to do is I had to just take it off screen and I had to put it in just using my loop and get my eye as close to the watch as I could. This is where, again, I think a stereo microscope would be good, because the digital one, you just get no depth perception. You can't see, you don't really know where your tweezer end is. So I think a stereo microscope, maybe you'll get that depth perception and maybe it'll make life a bit easier. Maybe that's just an excuse from me, who knows. But yeah, I lost a clip there. Not a proud moment, but this is watchmaking. Some days you love it, some days you just want to chuck everything in the bin. Thankfully I had a replacement, so this build can continue. But yeah, this is watchmaking. Everyone makes these mistakes. It's a lesson. It's a painful lesson. It's not something that I really want to be doing every week. But yeah, definitely something I need to learn from. Them little clips, them little retaining clips, they are a pain. Lesson learned. Next time, I think a bit of Rodico might be in order. But on to reinstalling this quick set lever arms. They've just gone on nicely. And as we push the lever arm here, we can just make sure that everything engages and everything is doing as it should. And then we got the winding pinion, which I'm just going to put a small bit of grease on the teeth. So this part of the keyless works. The keyless works, which is what enables you to change between settings on the watch, whether you want to mechanically wind the watch or you want to pull the crown out and change the time to set the time. But as you can imagine, this is all metal on metal, so it goes under quite a bit of abuse. So instead of using a fine oil, this one actually has quite a more heavy duty grease. And I'm just going to use the same for the winding stem. So again, that winding stem is under quite a lot of torque going through all of these parts in order to wind the watch and change the time. So I'm just putting on that grease just to try and help lubricate it, just to try and prolong the life. As well as all these posts. These posts need a bit of grease on as well. We've got the yoke going on. And the yoke has its own spring. And this is the part which snapped. So you can see the replacement now. You see where this part is missing? So this is the set and lever spring. So this one is good for the bin. See ya. Now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to reinstall this other one. This is what I got from my donor movement. Fortunate to get a cheap donor movement. It was a non-running movement. So I picked it up for about $15, $20. But it enabled me not only to use that, I got this part from the watch, which is what I needed in the first place, but I was also able to get that dual retaining clip for the balance wheel, the one that I lost. Maybe I'll find it in a few days, maybe I won't. Who knows? But now, once that set and lever spring's been replaced, we can see now, if I pull the crown out, it locks. And it's a nice, snappy lock. That's what we need to see. So if you're changing between settings, between winding the watch or setting the watch, that crown is not just going to loosely pop back into another position. So now it's nice and rigid, nice and fixed. Exactly how it should be. And you'll see here now. So remember I said earlier where that wheel that come detached from the cannon pinion. I had to reinstall it off camera because it was quite difficult to reinstall. But here it is. You see like the golden colour wheel underneath and the grey looking metallic pinion on top. That's what I had to reassemble. That's a 2-part piece. And it's actually a part of this particular movement that's quite a common problem. What some people find is that they lose a bit of tension between them 2 parts. Instead of them 2 parts moving in unison, they rotate at different speeds so that you can lose some timing in the watch. But this one is now nice and stiff, so I had to put it back in and I'd give it a little check, and I couldn't find any problems with it. I think it operates quite well. But we'll only know when we put the hands on the watch. Once we complete the build, put the hands on and start changing the time. But we're almost complete. We're getting to the end of this build. And so far we've had some challenges. We've had some errors. Some broken parts that needed to be replaced. Some self-inflicted woes. But we are almost there. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And most importantly, this watch is now up and running. It runs. We just don't know how well. So that's the plan. Let's continue the build. Let's get everything pieced back together. The final bit remaining is just that date disc. So I'm going to pick it up, plop it on, make sure it's engaged with that quick set arm. And then I'm going to put it aside. And remember this retaining plate that I said that it had that small spring underneath. Now I've got the challenge of putting it back in, which is making me a bit nervous because I've already had a couple of problems. Now I don't really want to be having another problem. But thankfully, this one is in. But that's the easy part. Now I need to flip it over and hope that gravity doesn't make it jump out, which fingers crossed it doesn't. And it looks like it's still in place. But I'm going to quickly get some screws in here and pinch it down. So this is just a date disc guard, like a dial guard. Just helps hold everything in position. And that arm is like a spring to help the date disc snap into position. But we put on the hour wheel. As well as we got some oil going on the date finger post and then the date finger going on next. Held down with one screw. And once we screw this down, we can actually check if this quick set date is going to function again. This spring here, this isn't for the date disc, this is for the day disc. That one that's written in Russian. But now, will it? It does. It works again. I expected it to work because it worked when we had the watch on the bench originally. Now it just feels nice. It just feels a lot smoother. With that working, we can put the day disc back on, set that in this position, put on the dial washer, and get this dial back in place. Again, look at this dial. So nice. I don't know why I like it so much. I just really like the colour. I think it's just aged so well. Just going to pinch that in with the 2 screws. And then we can see how well this watch is running. We can get it on the time grapher, finally. The watch is running. Just how well is it running? So a moment of truth. Here we go. I'm happy. I think the amplitude could be a bit higher. 198 seems a bit low. But everything else, the beat error is consistent. The rate is plus 23. But we're talking a very cheap watch from the 70s. And the most important thing is the time reading is stable. So it's not a chronometer. It's not like a Rolex. But it doesn't cost what a Rolex costs. It does run. It does hold time. And it is consistent. And that's the main thing. So I think this is, yeah, it's a good little project. We got this thing back up and running, and it's running pretty decently. It's running pretty well. So we can get these hands back on, which I've had to align, make sure I've had to flip over the day and the date to get to midnight. Then I know the hands should be at 12 o'clock. I'll push them on, push them down. I'll just check that they don't hit each other and that they are level, which they seem okay. And the date changes at midnight. Here we go. Snap. There we go. Nice. And we can get the seconds hand. Finally get the seconds hand back on. Again, just checking that the hour hand, the minute hand don't foul on the seconds hand, because what we don't want is them hands crossing each other and just stopping the watch altogether. So a few checks just to make sure they're level. The quick set date works. Everything functioning as should. And this watch is put together. The only thing that I could leave it, but I just don't like it. It's just a bit ugly, isn't it? I don't have a replacement crystal, so what I'm going to try and do is just do a quick polish. I don't have Polywatch either, so I have some toothpaste. But my thinking is it's going to do the same thing. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be absolutely shocking. But let's give it a go. I don't have any Polywatch. Let's give this a go. Toothpaste on the crystal, microfiber cloth. And I'm just going to go at this for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Give it a little clean up, give it a little buff, and let's just see what is done. I mean, it's still pretty bad, but it's better than what it was. There's some cracks in the crystals. This crystal needs to be changed, but I just can't get it. It's a random size. It's a 33mm acrylic crystal, which is not routine, it's not common. So I'm just going to have to lump it for now, and then get one for the future. But watch assembly going great. I'm quite happy. I'm quite pleased with this result. We've got a watch that wasn't running and had some problems, and now it's not only running, stable, but the issues have been fixed. And that's what watchmaking's about. It's about just giving something another lease of life. And we can see this watch, it's just ticking away nicely. It's just still running. Final touches then, we got this dust washer and the back cover. The back cover on this watch coming in two pieces. So you got the cover and then you got this retaining ring. And this ring is quite difficult to align and put in. So I'm just using 2 fingers to try and level it, and then that piece of wood to rotate it back in. But there we have it. Let's rotate it. Let's see. Give this watch another little look. Give it another little function check. Make sure everything's still running as it should. And everything's looking good. We got the seconds hand running. We got the minute and the hour hands okay. The quick set still ticking over. And that's it. We got this watch back up and running, back and nice and presentable. But a lot of people like to see watches on wrists. I got quite a big wrist, and this is quite a small watch, so it looks a bit silly on me. I think the strap's just a bit thin and a bit ugly. But watch back up and running. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. I hope you get some enjoyment out of this and can relax watching these types of videos. If you do like them, please comment, please like, please subscribe, and I shall see you guys in the next one. So take care everyone, and I'll see you all soon.